Well,
Why is Cole in this?
Cole wanted that drop in.
What the heck?
You don't know it?
No. Cole McKenzie. How did he get this?
I don't know.
I blame Blake. Look at him right now and yell at him.
Can you guys hear me on the screen?
I can hear you.
You're at home.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't get it. I don't know how. Trevor, can you hear me?
Yes.
The question is, can you hear us?
Yeah, I don't think you can.
I don't think you can hear us.
I don't think you can.
All right.
Hey.
Whoa, Joey's in here twice.
Kick him. Ban him from the meeting.
No.
Ban him from the meeting.
Hey.
Cole,
I can't hear you. I can't hear you. I can't hear
What's
you.
that noise?
This is toxic.
all right.
Ooga booga.
Yeah, kick him. Yeah. Get him out of here.
All right, guys. We're gonna start class. So hop on mute if you have a question. Hop on unmute, and we'll go from there. Yeah. What is?
It hurts the ears. It hurts.
I think I'm deaf now. Because he made a loop. Maybe we'll start class someday. Oh, I know what the problem is. I need to throw it up there. Can you guys at home still see the screen or see the?
Yes.
See the observation wells. You need to throw it there.
All right. So we're gonna start by watching this video.
That's a whole lot of pollution.
What
That video was sick.
This extend version is killing me. All right. So the reason why I showed that video is it kind of jumps into the ecosystems we were talking about, and then population genetics and natural selection, which we're kind of moving to. In that ecosystem, in that river, you have an algae, Joey, get off of solitaire. You have an algae that, depending on the situations in the river, whether that is temperature, whether that is chemicals released, depending on the type of year, you get color change to that algae that makes the river change colors. So if you think about like the organisms that live in that river, depending on their color that they are, some parts of the year or some years they might be really blended in and be able to hide super well. So like if the algae was pink and you have a pink fish, that pink fish is going to hide pretty well in that algae. If the algae switches colors to like a green, that pink fish is not going to be able to hide very well anymore. So depending on that ever-changing ecosystem, what the situation that algae is displaying or that the characteristics that algae is displaying determines what life is going to be like in that river at that specific moment in time. So we've already talked about Darwin and his idea of natural selection and where it came from, but now we're going to focus on what natural selection looks like when we actually look at an ecosystem, how we can actually see it occurring. So based on what we've already talked about on natural selection, what exactly is it? What are some things we expect to see when we're talking about natural selection?
Walnut 72.
Just pull back on there. Okay.
Are you able to ban him?
Cole, probably. What are some characteristics we expect to see when we're talking about natural selection, or we think about natural selection? So yeah, a relationship between what the animal looks like and where it lives or what it eats. Savannah, what did you say?
Weeding out the weak.
Weeding out the weak. So we talked about fitness or ability to survive in nature. The higher the fitness an organism has, the more likely it's going to survive to pass on its genetics. So when we talk about natural selection, there's kind of four big.
That's a cool thing.
There's four big main ideas that kind of are connected to natural selection, and these kind of stem from what Darwin himself kind of created when he wrote his book. The first one is offspring appear, behave, and function like their parents. This is kind of like Isaac Newton's laws of motion. They're kind of like duh, but somebody had to write it down and get credit for it. So in almost every situation, if an elephant becomes pregnant, it's going to give birth to something that looks like the parents. Is that always going to happen? No. Mutation occurs that can lead to many deformities. But in general, the offspring looks like the parent. It would be really weird if, like, somebody produced an offspring, a human person produced an offspring, and it looked like a bird. You know, that'd be super weird. That's not how it works. I'm a bird. Okay. Oh, my life. Just get this chair out of here. Let's just do that. What gives? There we go. Rule 2, differences among parents are passed to offspring. So if you had a mother that had albinism, it's very possible that you yourself will inherit the white fur coat. If we look at this deer, this white-tailed deer scenario, you would have a mother with its two fawns. The fawn on the right inherited albinism. The fawn on the left still has the natural white-tailed brown with the white underbelly and tail typical of the species. Just because your mother or your father have a mutation or a specific trait doesn't necessarily mean that you will display that trait. You might still carry it, but you won't necessarily display it. This is going to drive me nuts. All right, where's my cursor now? So this video kind of talks about how blue eyes came to be.
Why was there a thumbnail of a green eye? What?
Despite the apparent prevalence of the trait among swanky crooners and British spies and creepy old creatures who've just hung on to the ring for too long, only about 8% of the world's human population has blue eyes. Here in the US, it's about twice that, but that's still a lot less than it was at the turn of the 20th century when nearly half of all Americans had the trait. So what happened? Are blue-eyed humans going the way of the dodo? Well, no. We cleared up that rumor about redheads going extinct. The same goes for blue eyes. While the trait is becoming more rare, it's unlikely that it'll disappear altogether. Which is crazy when you consider that 10,000 years ago, blue eyes didn't even exist. In fact, there's a good chance that blue-eyed people may all share one common ancestor. Studies over the past decade have actually traced the trait to a mutation that most likely arose among brown-eyed people in a single human in the Black Sea region of southeastern Europe between 6,000 and 10,000 years ago. The mutation affected what's known as the OCA2 gene, which helps our bodies produce melanin, the brownish pigment that gives color to our hair and eyes and skin. The mutation created kind of a dimmer switch for the pigmentation, but it didn't affect the entire gene. Instead, it only affected the production of melanin in the iris, the ring structure around the eye that regulates how much light gets in. The bulk of the iris is a thick layer of melanin-producing cells called the stroma, and the OCA2 mutation turns the production of melanin in the stroma way down, but the pigment still shows up elsewhere, like in the hair and skin and other parts of the iris. Basically, the mutation keeps the stroma from being brown. So why blue then? Well, strictly speaking, blue eyes aren't actually blue. Instead, in people with this mutation, the stroma is full of nearly colorless cells, and when the light strikes them, they scatter the short blue wavelengths back out in a process similar to what makes smoke or fog look blue when light passes through them. If there's some yellowish pigment in the stroma, then the blue light will combine with that to make green, throw in a little bit of brown, and you have hazel. So how did we go from having no blue-eyed people to hundreds of millions of them in less than 10 millennia? No one's entirely sure why the trait spread so quickly through Europe. Some scientists think the mutation could have helped prevent certain eye disorders related to long, dark northern winters. But another factor appears to be that for whatever reason, lots of blue-eyed people simply mated with other blue-eyed people in the past, which kept the trait in circulation. For each of your genes, you have two different versions called alleles, one from your father and one from your mother. If you have at least one dominant allele for a gene, that's the trait you have. But blue eyes come from a recessive allele, which means if you inherit one allele for blue eyes and another for brown, you're gonna have brown eyes. But you still carry the recessive blue allele, which can be passed on. Which means that that first person that had that blue-eyed mutation didn't have blue eyes. They had to pass that on to their children, and their children had to pass it on to their children until eventually they came back together to make someone with two blue eye alleles. When both parents have blue eyes, they both have two recessive blue-eyed genes, which means their children will also have blue eyes, since there's no dominant gene to mask the recessive one. This is how you end up with Scandinavian countries that are 95% blue-eyed, and it also explains why the percentage of blue-eyers is dropping in much of the Western world. Human populations are a lot more evenly spread throughout the world than they were 10,000 years ago, so more blue eyes are pairing up with brown eyes and producing brown-eyed offspring. I wouldn't go so far as to call them endangered, but safe to say those blue-eyed singers and spies and golems will always be in the minority. Thanks for watching this SciShow Dose. If you'd like to help us keep exploring the world, just go to something we'll...
So, in general, who are my blue-eyed people? I've got blue eyes. In almost all cases, if you have blue eyes, one of your parents most likely has blue eyes, the other one might have brown eyes, but they might both have brown eyes. Your parents pass that recessive gene onto you, which means that you have two recessive alleles which code for blue eyes. if you were to have an offspring with someone that also has blue eyes, your children will have blue eyes because there's no dominant gene in your body or in whoever your partner's body would be in that situation. So blue eyes can easily appear, but they can quickly disappear because they can easily be covered up by the receptor of the dominant brown eye gene. Rule 3 with natural selection, and this is when it gets a little bit less duh kind of moment. With natural selection, there's kind of two main types of production or reproduction that we see in nature. The first one is the most common that you see like amongst insects and fish, and many reptiles reproduce this way as well, where you have parents producing a massive amount of offspring with very little parenting involved. And the hope is that maybe like of 1,000 offspring, maybe 10 of them survive to adulthood to reproduce. Enough where the genetics is still being passed on. So typically you see that in animal species that have very low parenting skills. With mammals and many birds, you see the opposite trend where you have a parent and another parent reproduce, and maybe they produce 1 or 2 offspring. But the goal of those parents is to put all of their time and energy into that offspring to make sure that they survive to adulthood. Because if they can do that, they're passing on the genetics that way. So in general, in the animal kingdom, if there is a species that does almost no parenting, usually you see the first type of reproduction where they produce thousands with the hope that a few of them survive. Or you see the reverse where they produce 1 or 2 offspring and they're going to put all of their energy into parenting, making sure that offspring makes it to adulthood so that your genetics pass on. If a whale produced like 1,000 offspring at one time, you'd have like whales swimming around that were like teeny tiny. And then maybe like 10 of them would survive. But they wouldn't be able to parent or take care of that many offspring. Also probably a dead whale. The fourth type, or the fourth rule, is some individuals, due to physical or behavior, are more likely to live or survive and reproduce. So if we look at the moth in the top right, there's actually 2 moths in that photo. There's the black moth, and there's a moth that blends almost perfectly into the bark on the tree that is right here. This is a situation that has kind of been very interesting to the ecological world for the last 100 years or so, or maybe about actually 100, 200 years. This takes place in the UK. Before the Industrial Revolution, it was very common to have the peppered moth, which is the one that is camouflaged with that bark, was the most common color of that species. After the Industrial Revolution, what was released into the air? Smoke, soot, all of that started to cling to these birch bark trees where these moths tend to live, and they turned the bark dark or black. A white moth on a black background, how does that work very well? Not great. So any bird or animal that would prey on the moths that would normally eat the black moth can now prey on the white moth because they stick out. The black members of the species were then camouflaged now, and we started to see large amounts of black moths of the peppered moth species appear, and we saw fewer of the pepper-colored moths. Now, because of environmental protections that have gone into place, we've started to see the pattern reverse and shift backwards, where we see more of the peppered moths because the bark on the tree has now reverted back to its natural color and the black colored moths are now being consumed more because they're not as fit as the white peppered moths are in this photo. So this is all driven based on genes and alleles, and I know you got a lot of this in biology, but I got to make sure we bring this back up to actually talk about the genetics, and specifically if we want to focus on the genetics of a population, we need to make sure we understand what genes and alleles are. So in any chromosome, you have 23 pairs of chromosomes, 46 individual chromosomes in your entire body that make up your DNA. If we break down that chromosome on strands of chromosomes, you will find genes. In those genes, you will find many, many different types of alleles. Those alleles can be separated down into dominant or recessive alleles, and they pair up. So sometimes you can get 2 dominant, sometimes you can get 2 recessive, sometimes you can get a recessive and a dominant, depending on what that gene codes for. It's not always as black and white as, oh, you have a dominant, you have a recessive. That's not quite how it works. But we can kind of generalize that way. If we think about hair color, there's not like it's just brown hair and blonde hair. There's red hair and strawberry blonde hair and gray hair and white hair, a whole bunch of different types of hair color. So it gets a little bit more interesting than just recessive and dominant, but for now we're going to think of it that way. Oh no. How would I link a photo? Oh well. So when we look and think about recessive and dominant alleles in our genes, in our chromosomes, we're thinking about the genotype of an organism. What the genes actually code for you to look like. What we actually look like and we appear is our phenotype. So we might have a recessive or a heterozygous or a dominant and recessive trait for eye color, but we actually show brown eyes. So genotype is what your genes actually show. Phenotype is what you actually see. Anyone got a dog that has blue eyes and a blue eye and a brown eye? Yeah. Huskies are pretty common to have it. I think Huskies have it pretty commonly. I think German Shepherds tend to have them too. It's kind of a cool idea. So here is another slide just kind of going through homozygous, meaning you have either dominant or recessive. Or you have heterozygous, meaning you have dominant, recessive. And you can have a combination of each, and that would determine what your phenotype is. So your genotype would be homozygous dominant, homozygous recessive, or heterozygous, but your phenotype is what you display because of those. So we're going to get into this idea of Hardy-Weinberg, and this is kind of where we're going to stop for the day. Hardy-Weinberg is an equation or a principle that we use in ecology to kind of be able to determine the presence or the percentage of individuals that show like homozygous dominant or homozygous recessive or even a heterozygous genotype when we see certain phenotypes in a population. There are a couple rules we have to follow when we think about Hardy-Weinberg. This is going to be the only math problem or math kind of thing I'm going to have you do pretty much the whole year. But it's kind of, if you want to learn about ecology, or you go up to college and have an environmental science class, or 2 years, whatever you end up doing, this is something that would pop up at some point. The rules with this is there is no random mate, or there is random mating, meaning that you're not telling oh, this cow, number 55, needs to breed with this bull, number 43. We don't have that going. It's completely random. No mutations occurring, meaning your genetics are steady through many generations. You don't have a bunch of blue-eyed cows and all of a sudden a brown eye appears. It is stable. Large population size. You don't have any animals moving into your population. So we don't have cattle being brought in from Minnesota coming into our population. It's stable. And then all of those individuals in that population have the same fitness. They are not sick. They are not weak. They are equal to each other. In a population out in nature, could this ever really happen? No. Somewhere along the line, one of these rules is going to be broken. This is just kind of a good way to generalize about what the perfect ecosystem would look like, so that we can try to predict what the alleles in the population look like mathematically and be supported by math. So with Hardy-Weinberg, we have two equations we need to know. They work together. They're not independent of one another. You need one to be able to do the other, and vice versa. If we have the variable p squared, that represents an individual or a percentage of individuals that are homozygous dominant, meaning that they have two dominant alleles. If we have 2p cubed, that represents an individual that is heterozygous for your trait that you're looking at, meaning they have a dominant and a recessive allele. And then you have Q squared, which is an individual or percentage of individuals that is homozygous recessive for a trait that you are looking at. If you look at both equations, they are equal to 1. So we are talking about a 100%. If we're talking about the whole population that we have. So if I had a population of 500 German Shepherds, my one that those equations are equal to is the 100% of all of those German Shepherds. That thing as a whole, that group or population as a whole. So we're going to start talking about this using chocolate labs with blue eyes as the example. So we have 8% of Somerset chocolate lab population has blue eyes, meaning because they have blue eyes, they're homozygous recessive. 8%. We want to know what percentage of individuals in the population carry a recessive allele. I don't want to know how many homozygous recessive individuals there are. I want to know if we took all of the alleles from all of the individuals and threw them in a bucket and we mixed it up, how many times, if I were to put my hand in there, would I pull out a recessive allele? So we're going to go to my equations, and we are going to do the math here, and I'm guessing it's not going to show up on the board, is it?
Yo, how'd you get that statistic?
What statistic?
The 8% of Somerset chocolate lab population is.
I just pulled it out of a hat, I guess.
Okay, gotcha.
I don't know that is the truth. I hope it's a larger percentage than that, but we will see.
Just an educated guess.
Yep.
Gotcha.
So let's see. How am I going to? Let's do this. Let's see if I can go to. Let's go to the next slide. Let's go to. Let's go to the meeting. Let's go to stop presenting. Go back to slide. Present now. Let's go to. Let's see if that works better. I doubt it, but we will see. Right up there. Stop. Meet. How am I going to present now? Your entire screen. I'm guessing I'm going to go to duplicate. Sorry about all this, guys. I'm still figuring out all this Google Meet stuff and making sure it all works correctly. Let's go to revert. Yeah, let's do it that way. That's a good call. Let's just go back to. Let's throw this back up there. And let's go here. Throw this. Good call. So if we think back to our Hardy-Weinberg problem, we have 8%, of course. Oh. If I bring it back over here, can I type on or write on it? I can pick up the marker, right? All right, so if you're at home, I will, as far as Hardy-Weinberg goes, I will make a video of myself talking through it. So you'll be responsible to watching that like 5-minute video of how it works, because I'm not able to get it to work on this smartboard right now. So I'm gonna do it on the board. So you just kind of got to listen along for now, and then I'll put that video there for you later. So if we go back and think about our chocolate lab population with blue eyes, we have 8% with blue eyes. We want to know what percentage has dominant alleles. We want to know what percent has heterozygous alleles. And then we want to know what percent has homozygous dominant. Those are our 3 questions that we're trying to solve here. We have our 2 equations. P plus Q equals 1. And then P squared plus 2PQ plus Q squared equals 1. Like I was saying, both equations work together to help us solve these problems. So if I have 8% of my individuals that have blue eyes, would that be homozygous recessive, heterozygous, or homozygous dominant? If you have blue eyes. Recessive, dominant, or heterozygous? Or both? Blue eyes are a recessive. So we're going to be, if you have blue eyes, you are recessive, meaning you have two lowercase alleles, two recessive alleles. So what variable out of these equations would represent recessive, homozygous recessive? If we go back a slide. What variable, as soon as it clears out, represents homozygous recessive? Q squared. So I'm going to plug my 8% in for Q squared. So I'm going to convert it to a decimal. So 0.08 equals Q squared. If I plug this number in this equation, can I figure out P, Q, and P squared yet? If I were to plug this, whatever this number is, this 0.08 into this equation, can I find what P squared and P and Q are equal to? Do I have enough information? No. Which equation do I have that I do have enough information to solve once I make one conversion? P plus Q. So I have Q squared. I need to convert it to Q. How do I convert Q squared to just Q? What do I have to do to get rid of a square? You need to square root it. So if I square root 0.08, what do I get out? So if someone can pull that out in their calculator and do the square root of 0.08 or on their phone and tell me what Q is. The nearest whole number. So 0.28. So our Q value is 28%. That Q value tells you that if I had a bucket filled with all the alleles of a population, dominant and recessive, put into a bucket, 28% of them would be recessive alleles. My first question is, I want to know what percentage dominant alleles are there in my population. So if I plug this 0.28 into my P plus Q equals 1, I can get what my P value is. So if I set this up as a subtraction, and I take 1 minus 0.28, I am going to get 0.72 out. And that equals my p-value. That is 72% of my population has a dominant allele in their genotype. I can now take this 72%, this p-value, I can figure out what percentage of my population is homozygous dominant simply by taking this p-value, 0.72, and I can square it. So if I take 0.72 and I square it, I'm going to get p squared, which is my homozygous dominant percentage. So if someone were to do 0.72 squared for me, what number are we going to get out? .52. So 52% or 0.52 of 52% of my population is homozygous dominant. So over half of my entire black lab population in Somerset has 2 dominant alleles for their gene with eye color. The last thing I need to figure out is this chunk of my equation, 2 times P times Q, and that'll tell me my homozygous risk, or my heterozygous percentage in my population. So I could take my p-value, what did I say, 0.72 times 2 times 0.28, and I could get it out. What's an easier way to figuring out this value out of this equation? Do I know this number? %, or 0.52. I do not know this, so I can just make it my x value. Do I know q squared? Yeah, I've given it at the beginning of my problem, 0.08. And the whole thing is equal to 1. So if I take 1 and I subtract 0.08 and I subtract 0.52, I can find my x value, and x is going to be my heterozygous individuals in my population. 0.47? 0.47. So we can go 0.47, or 47% of my population Did I do it? 80, yeah, sorry. I thought you said 40. Yeah, 40. So 40% of my population is heterozygous, which means that they carry a dominant brown eye gene and a recessive blue eye gene. What I would like you to do with these last couple minutes here in class is to start working on this problem for me. I will post a video of me talking through this setup so that it is on the classroom for you. When we come into class on Friday, I would like you to have this either shared if you're working at home, send me a Google Doc with this information on there, or a scratch sheet of paper with a picture sent to me so I can see that you've got this idea. So right now, on a scratch piece of paper, I've got a whole bunch up here. We don't have much, we got like half a minute. I want you guys to have this question worked on, practice, finished for me on Friday. So I can see that everyone's kind of got it. All right? That was the only math question I'll have you do all year in ecology. Kennedy? Tomorrow we are going to the river, so if you're online and you can hear this, tomorrow we will go to the river. What I need you to do is you need to come to ecology class at the school, and we will convoy down there. So we'll drive down there separately, but I can't have you drive straight there because I need to be there to, someone needs to be there to make sure that you're not goofing around or jumping in the river or whatever. You gotta be observed. So come to ecology first, and then we'll go to the river together. We'll head down there probably. We'll probably get back around. Try to give you plenty of time because being that we'll drive down there, we'll probably have plenty of time. So we'll probably be back with maybe 5 minutes into Mod 4. Any questions from you people at home?
No.
All right, like I said, I will post a video about Hardy Weinberg so you guys can see it and do that practice problem for me for Friday.
Gotcha.
All right, we will see you guys tomorrow.
Yeah, I'll probably be in tomorrow, so I'll see you in person.
Yeah, all right, cool. Bye-bye.
Adios.
Bye.